I'm about to get a vehicle lesson or lecture from Uncle Al. Seems pretty busy.
I think we're gonna, instead of auto mechanic lesson today, we're gonna get a lesson on electricity of direct current, which is considered, direct current is 12 volt or battery operated. It's referred to as direct current, different from alternating current in a house. Okay. Alternating current continues to alternate around and around and around. It goes back and forth like this actually technically. This direct current can only work, current of electricity can only work if there's a draw on a negative side. This negative pole draws the electricity to this, through this battery, but draws electricity from here. And this drawing means nothing will work unless it's grounded. So what we're having a problem with is this battery is a brand new battery. But when we turn over the car, it's dragging. Now this line right here apparently looks like as if it goes down to the starter. And the starter's down there. And typically what happens is, when a starter's going bad, it will draw more amps than it needs to turn. A starter on average only draws around 10 or 12 amps. Now this amperage is the load capacity of the battery. This battery is a 600 amp battery. 600 is called 600 cold cranking amps, CCA. Right. I don't know if you can see it.
I can see it.
But anyways, that means this battery will hold 600 amps, and it's called cold cranking amps. So you can drain this 600 amps by just trying to start it. But now if you've got other issues wrong mechanically, where your spark plug is bad and it won't start, or you got a cracked distributor cap and it's cracked and it ain't passing electricity through, then all it's doing is sucking the electricity out, draining this amps. Once the amps get down to 10 or 12, nothing works.
So this is why the van won't start sometimes?
The fan won't start, typically because there's some kind of, the first thing you check is connection problems. Now what could be problem is, like you suggested, and as I suggested, that the cold amps and the amps drawn on the starter, what happens is the bearings in the starter get worn, and when they get worn, it takes more electricity to turn it. Okay. And then the more amps it takes to turn it causes the battery to drain faster. So now what it's doing now is that if it's taking 64, 80, or 120 amps to turn the starter, to turn the engine, then this cold cranking amps of 600 is going to be drawn down after a few times of trying to, and it'll go empty, and then it'll just go, you won't get nothing. That's if you have a bad starter. But what happens is, because the starter's going bad, it means there's resistance, and the resistance is making it draw more amp. But there's another issue that happens that draws amps, and that's a loose connection. Okay. A loose connection, it doesn't make sense, but what happens is a loose connection actually draws more amps than a tight connection. Now, so what I'm looking at here is a possible loose connection. Right here, you see this?
Oh, I see that.
So if this is a loose connection, and these wires here, there are three main wires, power wires. One goes to the alternator, one goes to the fuse box. I'm assuming one goes to the alternator, and one goes down to the starter. I think this is the starter wire, because I followed it down. So what we need to do is we need to tighten this guy.
Okay.
Now the reason why it's so loose is because the clamp is already closed. See how further closed it is? Yeah. So I can't tighten this down anymore. If I tighten it, it's not going to pull this tight on here. So there's a couple of things I need to consider. One, change this. Two, move that. Three, or put a nail in between here, or a bolt right down in between there. Just spread it open, put the bolt down, tighten it back up to get this tight. Now what also creates bad connections is corrosion. So if you have corrosion, you got to clean it, because if you don't clean it, you're going to get a bad connection. All you're going to get is and it's not going to really pass. Not even 10 volts are going, 10 amps aren't going to make it. So what it does is it drains the amps right here. So you don't want to do that.
No.
So we need to clean the contacts. Disconnect this. Always disconnect the ground before you work on anything here, because the ground wires draws the electricity. All right, so
Okay.
that's our solution for today. Let's see if it's going to work.
Okay.
But first, let me give a sample of how it starts so bad.
Okay.
Here we go. And we're going to crank it up, and you'll see what I mean. You hear it. Oh, you know what? I think because we shimmied the wires.
Really?
That is, yes.
So now it's working great?
Yes, because we shimmied the wire. See, we moved this around, and so now it's just cranking right over. And another telltale sign of a bad starter, though, separate from this issue, is the hot wires get really hot.
Huh.
And when I touched this, I burned my finger. It was like, psst. Of course, a bad connection does that too.
Right.
So here's what happens: we gotta tighten this guy up.
Right.
All right, so that's what we're gonna do.
And people say we shouldn't touch things.
You know, it helps to know what you're doing. Uncle Al has burned, one time in a car, I burned 2 batteries up.
2.
Yep. And then another time, because after I found out the experience, I took my car to a shop. I was like a big name shop. What they wanted to do? They wanted to replace my alternator.
Uh-huh.
I said, my alternator? Not on this particular car, but my alternator. I said, I just got a new alternator. He said, well, sir, according to our computers, it says you're not getting enough voltage. You know what it was?
What was it?
It was the alternator belt. It was loose, shimmying, waggling.
Oh.
And so the engine couldn't turn the alternator, and the alternator couldn't put it out charging. And I said, you know, these guys went to school to learn that computer, but did anybody ever tell them to look at the belt to see if it's loose?
They aren't educated.
Lack of common sense. All right, so here we go.